They say the truth doesn't knock. It slips under the door while you're busy telling yourself everything is fine. My name is Edward Hale. I'm 72 years old. And until last spring, I thought the hardest lesson left for me to learn was how to ask for help gracefully. Turns out I had a few other lessons waiting, about loyalty, about fear, and about how quickly a lie can borrow the face of medicine. It started on a Thursday that didn't deserve to be important. My son Andrew had texted earlier, "Busy day, rain check for dinner?" Fair enough. I decided to swing by his place anyway, drop off the woodworking clamps he wanted, leave them on the porch, and maybe wave at the grandkids if they were around. I drove the old sedan I keep because it still smells faintly like the pine I used to cut in my shop. The sky was the color of dirty ice and the air had that metallic taste you only notice when you're alone. As I pulled up, I noticed the side gate was open. Odd. Andrew is compulsive about latches. I stepped through, clamps under my arm, and heard voices from the patio. Laughter, low and close. I rounded the hedge and froze. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, was in a stranger's arms, his hand on the small of her back like he'd been invited to live there. I didn't mean to spy. I wasn't quiet on purpose. I stumbled. The clamps clicked together, and Vanessa's head snapped up. For a second, every part of her face told the truth. Shock, then calculation. She broke away from the man and stepped toward me with a smile that had never belonged to a smile. "Edward, you startled me," she said. "We were just—" She left the sentence out, hoping I'd fill it with something polite. "I'll go," I said. My voice sounded like cold wood. "I shouldn't have—" "Please," she said, touching my arm. "Don't tell Andrew. You know how stressed he's been. He'll misunderstand." The man looked at the stones like they were interesting. I said nothing and left the clamps by the door. On the way out, I glanced up at the eaves and noticed the black bead of a camera lens on the corner of the neighbor's house. Mark's place. He's the young guy in the navy hoodie who always parks his pickup 3 inches from the curb and waves at everyone without expecting anything back. He'd told me once that he installs security cameras for side money. I remember thinking, in a detached way, that angles matter. The camera would have a clear view of the patio. That night I didn't sleep much. I've been alone since my wife, Elaine, passed 8 years ago. Grief is a night watchman. It makes the rounds whether there's something to guard or not. I got up at 3, made tea that tasted like boiled regret, and told myself 100 different versions of what I should do. Tell Andrew and rip the bandage. Confront Vanessa and let her panic write her confession. Pretend I saw nothing and die a little for the privilege of peace. If you've ever had to choose between telling the truth and keeping your family from shattering, you know there's no choice at all. Only the moment you accept you're going to be the bad guy either way. Before I decided, the decision tried to eat me alive. The next afternoon, Vanessa came to my house with a casserole she hadn't made. "We missed you last night," she said, stepping into my kitchen as if the floor had asked her to. "Andrew's been so worried about you. He says you've been forgetful." I misplaced the remote and remembered where it was, I said. "Not exactly a clinical picture." She smiled with her teeth only. "You know how it is at your age. Memory plays tricks. And you seemed confused yesterday at the house." "I was surprised," I said. "People often confuse surprise with confusion when it suits them." Her face didn't change. It just settled further into whatever plan she'd been forming since the garden. "Edward," she said gently, "I talked to Dr. Adler. He's a neurological specialist. He thinks we should do some cognitive screening, just to be safe. Early detection is everything. You called a doctor about me? I asked. Only because we care, she said quickly. And because lately you've been, misplacing things, forgetting dates, telling stories out of order. Andrew is scared. Andrew is busy, I said. There's a difference. She put the casserole on the counter and touched my wrist like she was checking my pulse. Tomorrow afternoon, she said, I'll pick you up at 2. I have my own car. Her smile hardened. Of course, but this is for the best. When she left, the kitchen felt smaller. I called Andrew. He didn't pick up. I texted, I stopped by yesterday. We should talk. He replied with a single bubble 30 minutes later. Nessa said you were confused. We'll sort it tomorrow. That night, I walked the perimeter of my house like a man guarding a city from the inside. Around 11, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mark in his hoodie, rain beading on his shoulders. Evening, Mr. Hale, he said. Sorry to bother you. Quick question. Did you stop by Andrew's yesterday? Yes, I said. He looked down the street and back. My outside camera caught some movement on their patio. The angle's wide, so it picks up their place too. I was swapping SD cards today when I saw, well, I figured it wasn't my business. But now I'm thinking maybe it is. Come in, I said. Please. We sat at the kitchen table. He set a small SD card on the wood, like it was a fragile animal. I always pull the card and copy to a USB before I delete. Habit. Insurance. I didn't tell them I had footage, but Vanessa came by earlier, said there'd been a porch pirate in the neighborhood, asked if she could check my cameras. Friendly-like. He paused. I let her sit at the computer with me. She's smooth. While I went to get coffee, she popped out the card and tried to delete the last 24 hours from the drive. She wasn't fast enough. I exhaled. It sounded like relief and grief had decided to harmonize. So you have it. He tapped his pocket. On a USB. I didn't want to keep it. But I didn't want to be the guy who threw away the only umbrella and then stood in the rain with an apology. I looked at him. Why are you helping me? He shrugged. Because my dad lives 3 states away, and if someone was about to rewrite reality around him, I'd hope his neighbor wasn't looking at his phone. I nodded. Tomorrow Vanessa is taking me to a cognitive screening with Dr. Adler. Is that Dr. Raymond Adler at Riverside Neurology? He asked. Yes. He blew out his cheeks. I installed a home system for him last year. He's got money like a magician has scarves. Good reputation, but the kind of man who knows exactly where the lines are and how to lean on them. I'm not afraid of questions, I said. I'm afraid of answers someone else writes. Then let's bring a pen, he said. The next day, Vanessa arrived at 2 sharp, perfume and purpose. She drove because control is easiest to exert from behind the wheel. Riverside smelled like antiseptic optimism. Dr. Adler wore a blue suit and an expression he might have bought with it. We'll do a quick MMSE, he said, like he was offering me a mint. Some memory recall, orientation, attention. This isn't a diagnosis, just data. I like data when it belongs to me, I said. Vanessa sat in the corner with her phone, already rehearsing her face for the result she'd arranged. I did the test. I recited the 3 words he asked me to remember, drew a clock with hands that knew where to point, spelled a word backwards, named a pen a pen. I missed 1 subtraction in a serial 7 sequence because I was busy remembering the day Elaine taught Andrew long division at the kitchen table and he cried from frustration until she made the problem a story about apples and pirates. I corrected myself. Adler frowned like he'd lost a bet. "Mr. Hale," he said, "there are some mild deficits." "Age appropriate?" I asked. "Possibly," he said. The word had too much room in it. "But given concerns expressed by your family—" "What concerns?" I asked, turning to Vanessa. She put a hand to her chest. "Edward, you forgot my name at dinner last week." "I called you dear because we were at a table with your friends, and I was being polite," I said. "And you didn't show up to Andrew's meeting with the contractor." "You texted me an hour before, and I was at the dentist," I said. "Also, I'm not a walking calendar for your projects." Adler cleared his throat. "The question is whether Mr. Hale's executive function is declining. The safest course would be a short inpatient observation, 24 to 48 hours, so we can run additional tests and ensure his safety at home." "Inpatient," I repeated. "To run tests, you can run outpatient." "Insurance prefers clear documentation," he said, "and the family would have peace of mind." "Whose peace?" I asked. But the decision had already made its way down the hallway. They admitted me. I signed because refusing doesn't always keep you free. Sometimes it just paints a target around the refusal. The room was white and humming and cold. Vanessa left with a peck on the air. "Rest," she said. "This is for your own good." She took my clothes to wash them. She left my phone to reduce stimulation. She kept my dignity because it doesn't fit in a tote bag. That night, a nurse named Harold adjusted my IV with the kindness of a man whose hands are tired and whose patience isn't. "You got family coming?" he asked. "I have a son," I said. "He's busy." "Busy's a costume," he said. "You can tell because it never gets dirty." Around 11, the door clicked softly and Mark slid in, carrying a paperback and something smaller. "Visiting hours are suggestions," he said. He set the book on the tray. He held up a tiny device between thumb and forefinger. "This is a voice recorder. Legal as rain if you're present in the conversation. If anyone tries to talk you into anything your gut doesn't like, let it sit on the sheet. I'll be outside with my ridiculous vending machine coffee." "Vanessa tried to delete your footage," I said. "I know," he said, "but what she deleted was the copy on my local drive. Before she came over, I had already cloned the SD card to this." He patted his chest pocket. "Call me paranoid. I call me employed." The next morning, Dr. Adler came with a colleague and a clipboard that made him taller. "Mr. Hale," he said, "we're going to run a few more assessments. While we're at it, there's some paperwork we should address. Advanced directives, medical power of attorney. Given the circumstances, it would be prudent to designate a responsible party." "Like my son?" I asked. "If you trust his judgment," he said. His tone suggested that if I didn't, the hospital had forms to compensate. "May I have my phone?" I asked. "I'd like my lawyer present." "We can help you with generic forms," he said. "No need to complicate." I set the little recorder on the sheet. Let my finger brush the button. "I prefer complications that prevent theft," I said. He looked at the device, then at me. His smile didn't quite make it to his eyes. "We'll come back," he said. They came back that afternoon with Vanessa and, surprise, Andrew. My son looked like a man who has swallowed his own doubt and is hoping no one notices the shape of it in his throat. Vanessa squeezed his hand and placed a folder on the rolling tray like an offering. "Dad," Andrew said, "we're worried. You drove to the grocery store and ended up at the post office. You keep repeating stories. You left the stove on. I left the kettle on, and the whistle told me about it, I said. And the post office is next to the grocery store. Please, Vanessa said, turning to Dr. Adler. We just want him safe. He's always been stubborn, but lately... Adler nodded. Mr. Hale, given our observations and the family's concerns, we recommend a temporary guardianship for medical decisions, just until we can finish evaluation. It's a standard step. Standard like a cast for a sprain, or standard like a tow truck for a car that still starts? I asked. I picked up the pen they'd left there for me, examined it as if it might explain itself. Who would be the guardian? Andrew, Vanessa said smoothly. Naturally. I clicked the pen. The recorder kept its own counsel on the sheet. No, I said. Dad, Andrew said, sounding rehearsed. Don't make this harder. Harder than what? I asked. Harder than giving away the right to decide whether a doctor who plays golf with my daughter-in-law can tuck me into a diagnosis I don't have. Harder than pretending I don't know what I saw on your patio. His head jerked, anger or fear snapping its leash. Vanessa told me you claimed. I didn't claim, I said. I observed. Vanessa put a hand to her mouth, shock acting. This is what I mean, Andrew. Paranoia, confabulation. The door opened. Mark slid in with a knock that announced itself 5 seconds too late. Apologies, he said. Wrong room. He stayed. Actually, not wrong. Who are you? Adler asked. Neighbor, Mark said. He lifted the USB drive from his pocket between 2 fingers. And witness. I hadn't asked him to barge in. I hadn't told him to bring anything. He'd brought himself anyway, which is rarer than evidence. Adler stiffened. This is a medical consultation. You need to leave. Of course, Mark said. I just wanted to make sure Mr. Hale had a copy of the power of attorney form my attorney suggested. He set a second folder on the tray beside Vanessa's. It appoints Ms. Priya Patel, Edward's lawyer, as temporary medical proxy until an independent neuropsych evaluation can be completed. Standard step. His voice matched Adler's exactly when he said the last 2 words, which I enjoyed more than I should have. Andrew looked between faces, trying to decide which story would cost him the least. Dad, he said softly. We're just trying to help. Then help me call Priya. Vanessa's smile thinned. He's confused, she said to Adler. We can't delay necessary care. Adler hesitated, a brief, almost invisible pause where a man decides who he is. It lasted just long enough for my recorder to notice. Mr. Hale, he said, if you refuse to sign, we can petition the court for emergency authority. For what emergency? I asked. For a boilerplate evaluation? He glanced at Vanessa, and in that glance was an entire conversation about money and favors and the softness of lines when you lean on them daily. Get out, I said. I didn't raise my voice. Come back with my lawyer present. They left with the folder of generic forms. Mark exhaled. Well, he said, that was a lot of professional concern in one room. Thank you, I said. What you did, I didn't ask. You didn't have to, he said. Also, Adler's camera system has a nice blind spot by the back stairwell. If someone were to record a conversation there, say between a doctor and a woman discussing, hypothetically, the timing of a guardianship petition, no one would be the wiser. He tapped his pocket. The little USB clicked softly against his knuckle. Want to take a walk? I wasn't supposed to leave the room without someone in scrubs. Harold appeared, looked at Mark, and pretended to believe whatever lie Mark told him about ordered ambulation. We wheeled down the hall. By the back stairs, voices slid around the corner before bodies did. "It has to be today," Vanessa was saying, "before he calls anyone. I told you he's confused." Adler sighed. "Guardianships aren't vending machines. A judge will ask questions. Does your husband support this?" "Andrew will sign," she said. "He knows his father needs care." "And the property?" Adler asked quietly. There it was. Not in a medical chart, but in the air. Gold always smells the same. "Once we have authority," Vanessa said, "we'll ensure he's not taken advantage of." Mark held up his phone. It wasn't elegant audio, but it was enough. We slipped back to my room. He transferred that clip and the patio footage onto a fresh drive, labeled it with my name, and placed it in an envelope with the caution of a man putting a baby to bed. "Priya?" he asked. "Priya," I said. Harold watched from the doorway, face impassive. As Mark left, Harold said, "You didn't hear this from me, but the social worker on call tonight is the good one. Name's Lillian. Ask for her. She knows the difference between a fall risk and a land grab." I asked for her. Lillian had the calm of a woman who has heard too many stories to be shocked and refuses to be bored by any of them. I told her mine. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. She listened, watched my hands, watched my eyes, watched the way I didn't reach for help unless I had to. "Do you feel safe at home?" she asked. "I do if the truth can travel," I said. "Then let's put it on a bus," she said. She called Priya. 40 minutes later, the lawyer whose number I should have dialed 2 days earlier walked in with a tote bag, a portable scanner, and the face of a woman who enjoys problems because they keep her from being bored. I signed a narrowly tailored medical proxy granting her limited authority for the duration of the hospitalization and any required outpatient evaluation. She sent a copy to the hospital, one to a judge she addressed by first name in the email, and one to herself because she likes redundant parachutes. Then we played our recordings. Priya didn't smile. Lawyers don't smile at evidence like this. They inventory it the way carpenters inventory lumber, checking lengths, squaring ends, imagining structures. "We'll schedule an independent neuropsych eval with Dr. Kaminsky," she said. "He's a curmudgeon whose hobby is telling other doctors they've overreached. He will either clear you or give me exactly the narrow deficit language I need to keep anyone from bulldozing you. In the meantime, no one puts a form in front of you without me present." Andrew came the next morning, alone. He looked 10 years older than he had 2 days ago. He stood by the window where the blinds cut his face into stripes. "Dad," he said, "Vanessa says you're making a scene." "I'm making a record." I said. He flinched. "Did you really think she—" "I didn't think," I said. "I saw." He stared at the floor. "She told me you were confused. She said you were making up stories. And you know how you've been lately, repeating yourself, getting dates wrong. It seemed plausible." He swallowed. I didn't want it to be plausible. "Do you want the footage?" I asked. "Or do you want to keep the version where your life is simpler?" He didn't answer. He sat. We looked at the bland painting on the wall together, like it might tell us what to do. After a while, he said, "She wants me to sign guardianship papers. She says you need protection." "I do," I said, from people who would like my signature more than my consent. He rubbed his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry I wasn't there yesterday. I'm sorry I've been absent. Busy as a costume, I said, quoting Harold. Yours fits well. He had the decency to nod. What do you want me to do? Stand next to me while I do it, I said. We discharged 2 days later with Priya snapping at heels that tried to bite. Dr. Kaminsky's evaluation the following week left no room for interpretation. Age-normal cognition, he wrote, with mild attentional variability typical for this cohort. No evidence of dementia. He underlined no, as if he knew it would need underlining. We sent that to the hospital, to the court, and, because pettiness is a spice I permit myself in small, therapeutic doses, to Adler's office with a note that said simply, "For your files." Priya filed a complaint with the medical board. Vanessa hired a lawyer whose website had more stock photos of gavels than any site should. Andrew moved into the guest room over my garage and stopped saying the word busy with the pride of a man announcing a promotion. He cooked. Badly, but with intent. He picked up the wood shavings in my shop and asked questions about dovetails the way a man asks questions when he's trying to build something impossible and hopes the language is the same. Mark brought me coffee in paper cups that sweated through their sleeves, and we sat on the steps and planned what to do with the rest of my life. When someone drags you to the edge of a cliff and you don't fall, it feels like waste to go back to walking in circles on the safe grass. I called Priya and told her I wanted to establish the Hale Foundation with 2 purposes: to provide grants for elder legal defense in cases of medical overreach and family coercion, and to fund neighborhood safety tech, cameras, lighting, doorbell systems, for low-income blocks where the truth can't afford to be seen. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Vanessa didn't go quietly. People rarely do when the mirror cracks. She tried an end run, filed a petition alleging I was susceptible to undue influence by my neighbor. She implied Mark had manipulated me into accusing her. Priya smiled with her eyes only and produced the patio footage and the stairwell audio. The judge, a woman who had probably lived through 36 similar plots and had no patience for amateur dramatists, watched, listened, and looked at Vanessa the way an adult looks at a child who has broken a vase and then blamed gravity. "Petition denied," the judge said, "and Mrs. Hale, consider your next moves carefully. Bringing false claims of incapacity against an elder is not a hobby without consequences." The hospital settled privately. Adler received a letter from the board I dearly wish I could have framed. Vanessa filed for separation from Andrew a month later to focus on herself, which is a phrase people use when they hope no one will notice the debris field behind them. Andrew cried in my kitchen, like a boy who scraped both knees and didn't know whether to be angry at the pavement or his own legs. "Dad," he said, "I don't know how I didn't see it." "Seeing hurts," I said. "People learn to look at anything else." We kept moving. The foundation took shape. Mark agreed to serve as operations director. He hates titles, so we called him the guy who makes things happen. We partnered with a community legal clinic and an electrical contractor who gave us a rate that embarrassed me into paying more. We started quietly. 3 camera installs on a block where Mrs. Ortega had her porch light stolen twice. A grant to Mr. Lewis, whose son's wife had tried to get him declared incompetent because he refused to sell the house his late wife painted every summer. A workshop where a social worker taught the difference between a power of attorney signed under stress and one signed with a lawyer you choose because she doesn't care if you cry in her office. I updated my will. Not out of anger. Anger is a terrible architect. but because clarity belongs in ink. Priya drafted it. I wrote the letter that would sit on top of it like a hand on a shoulder. I left a significant share to the foundation, assets that would live longer than I will and do more good than sentiment. I left Mark a house, mine, because men who build doors for others should never have to worry about their own locks. I left Andrew the rest, but not as a reward, and not as a leash, as a road. The letter said, Andrew, there are two stories men tell about love, that it is unconditional and that it is earned. Both are wrong in the ways that make us lonely. Love is given, and then it becomes a place you choose to stand. You left that place for a while. You found it again. The terms attached to your inheritance are not punishments. They are invitations to keep standing where you said you want to be. For 2 years, volunteer with the foundation twice a month. Not with your signature, with your time. Take calls from people whose kids are convincing doctors to put them away for convenience. Sit with them in waiting rooms that smell like lemon and fear. Help install the camera that shows the truth when someone tries to erase it. Meet with Priya when a case needs more backbone than money. If you do this, the assets release to you and then, in time, to the foundation in your name as a partner. If you do not, they release directly to the foundation without you. You will still be my son. You will simply not be my partner in this work. I loved you when you were small and scared of the dark. I loved you when you were big and scared of the light. I would like, before I go, to love the man who stands in both and doesn't flinch. Dad, I gave the letter to Priya and slept better. The last act of our little play happened on a Tuesday that thought it was nothing. Vanessa appeared at the foundation office with a fion I didn't recognize and a story that changed 3 times in 10 minutes. She said Mark had stolen the patio footage from her home network. Then she said I had coerced her. Then she said none of it mattered because everyone knows old men get confused. She hadn't learned the first rule of losing. Stop digging. Mark, who rarely speaks when anger is an option, cleared his throat. You tried to erase the footage from my drive, he said. You didn't know I had already cloned the card to a USB. I didn't bring it to the police because I thought Andrew deserved the chance to find out from his father, not from a report. That was generous. It won't happen again. She left with a smile shaped like a blade. I watched her go and felt the complicated mercy of not hating her. People do desperate arithmetic when the life they built is balancing on a lie. They try to borrow truth at interest. It never works. Months passed. Andrew showed up every Thursday and every other Saturday because calendars are how we turn intentions into something with weight. He answered calls at the foundation, learned to say, I don't know, but I will find someone who does, and meant it. He helped Mr. Lewis keep his house. He installed a doorbell camera for Mrs. Ortega and came back 2 weeks later to adjust the angle because she liked seeing the mailman's smile. He sat with a man at Riverside whose daughter had brought a binder of forms and the polite impatience of someone who believes love is a transaction. He held the man's hand while Priya explained, calmly and clearly, why no one would be signing anything that day. We lost some. You always do. A judge with a full docket and a thin tolerance signed an order we couldn't unwind in time. A woman whose son had already moved into her guest room for caretaking couldn't bear to testify. We learned to grieve without drowning. One evening, Mark and I were standing in my driveway, watching the sun decide whether it wanted to show up for the end of the day. Andrew walked up with a box of screws because he'd started carrying extras. He'd learned that half of kindness is being overprepared. Dad, he said. Vanessa called. What did she want? I asked. To tell me she's moving, he said. West Coast. Says she needs a fresh start. He looked at the asphalt like it might have advice. I told her I hope she finds the person she lied about being. That's a good blessing, I said. Complicated. Honest. He nodded. I hated you for a day, he said, almost apologizing for how small the number was. For not letting me live in the simpler version, where none of this was my fault. Then I watched a recording that didn't care about my feelings, and I started counting different things. What's that? Mark asked. How many people show up with their eyes open? Andrew said. I want to be one of them. The city got better in places no one photographs. A porch light that used to flicker started staying on. A woman's voice on a call to the foundation stopped shaking halfway through her story. A doctor at Riverside got very careful about protocols, which is to say, he remembered why he'd taken an oath. The board sent him another letter. I didn't frame it. I didn't need the reminder. On my birthday, Priya brought a cake that tasted like someone had followed directions and then poured in twice as much vanilla as was prudent. We ate it on paper plates in the office because the work didn't stop just because I had become older in a way people feel obligated to remark on. Andrew handed me a folded paper, the first letter he'd ever given me without being forced by a school assignment. It wasn't eloquent. It didn't need to be. It said what letters are supposed to say. I see you. I am trying. I am not done. I will die someday, as all men do. If I am lucky, it will not be in a bright room where a stranger keeps telling me to relax. If I am luckier, the last sound I hear will be someone laughing about something that happened on a porch we helped keep safe. I don't know what will be written about me. Obituaries are for the living anyway. I do know what we have built. A place where the truth can outlast the people who hate it. A fund that pays for the kind of courage that doesn't photograph well. A son who learned to stand in the light without blinking. If you need a moral, people always do, even when they pretend they don't. Try this. You don't have to win every fight to make a life you can be proud to leave. You can be the man who brings a USB when everyone else is bringing opinions. You can be the father who stops choosing peace over honesty and discovers, to his surprise, that honesty is the only peace that lasts. And if someday you find yourself in a room where someone says you're confused and you know you're not, remember, the truth doesn't knock. It knows where the spare key is. It lets itself in. My name is Edward Hale. I saw what I saw. They tried to turn that into sickness. A neighbor showed up with a small piece of plastic and a larger piece of bravery. A lawyer brought a spine you can file. A son decided to be the kind of man I had hoped I was raising. And that's enough. More than enough. That's a life I can sign my name to.